So if you're like me, you probably have a few pieces of art, a book or a movie or an album that you are just really, really passionate about. Like it changed your life. You wish everyone would read it or watch it or listen to it, whatever the case may be. I have loads of examples of these things for me, but for today's video, I'll just mention The Count of Monte Cristo as a book. It is traditionally the answer I give when I'm asked for my favorite book of all time. But for you, for the rest of the video, maybe just imagine whatever book or TV show or movie or album you most passionately care about. So just imagine that. I'm gonna use The Count of Monte Cristo as the example, but you pick your own. So again, if you're like me, you've probably had a conversation similar to this, where someone will just in conversation say, oh, actually The Count of Monte Cristo, I've never read it. And then for me, traditionally the urge has been in the back of my mind to say immediately, oh, you haven't read The Count of Monte Cristo? Right? I mean, they just told me that, but I'm saying it kind of in shock, just to double check. And then, when they've confirmed, yeah, no, I haven't read it. I just said that actually. My next response is to say, oh, you have to read it. And sometimes I'd even follow that with, it'll change your life. And as I've gotten older, my opinions on these books and movies that I care about hasn't really changed. If anything, I've become more passionate about them and I've seen the impact they've had on me, and I wish more people would read them and watch them. But even as my interest in these things has grown, my method of recommending them has shifted to a much less direct approach. So I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why I don't say you have to read The Count of Monte Cristo or, fill in the blank anymore. And then I'm going to offer maybe a possible solution. So the first reason I don't say, oh, you have to read this book anymore is purely practical. I think it just ends up setting expectations too high. So for example, if I told you, whoa, hey, you haven't seen The Lord of the Rings? Oh, you have to see them. Those movies will change your life. I've kind of just set the bar, at the ceiling. I mean, life-changing movies are few and far between. I don't feel like I'm exaggerating to say that. For me, those movies did change my life. I saw them in high school and I watched the behind the scenes on the DVDs, and that and my research on Peter Jackson and just the process of making the films was one of the driving factors that led me to pursue film in college.
Now, as I was saying, the jump of a lifetime!
Which led to the job I have in teaching film at a high school today. It has impacted a lot of my life. But I think it'd be a little bit absurd for me to assume that it will have that exact same effect on you if you were to watch them. So anyway, I've set the bar at 100%. So let's say you take my advice and you pop in The Fellowship of the Ring this weekend, and you're sitting down and you're like, okay, it's pretty good. I like it. There's some nice grass and some nice sky and swords are cool. But with every passing minute, I think you'd rightfully so be thinking, is this the scene that's going to change my life? Like, when's the life-changing scene? You're looking at the movie through the lens of perfection, because that's the lens I told you to use. I told you it's perfect. I told you it's the best film and you had to see it. And so since I've set your expectations at 100% enjoyment, the best that can possibly happen is I'm right and you love it. But anything under 100% and you'll be disappointed. So saying something like you have to see it doesn't really leave you a lot of room for exceeded expectations. And a lot of joy in art comes from when the art exceeds your expectations. The second reason has more to do with the way I feel like I'm positioning myself and you in the conversation. If I'm not careful and I say something like, oh, you haven't read The Count of Monte Cristo, you have to read The Count of Monte Cristo. Even if I'm not trying to sound this way, it can totally sound accidentally like I'm saying, you haven't read this, I have. It was something we were supposed to do. You didn't do it, but I did. And so therefore, I'm ahead and you're behind. And I don't really think that's most people's intent when they're saying this. So if you are someone who does say, you have to see this movie, I'm not accusing you at all. This is something I do and did, and I'm trying to get rid of it because of how it might sound. I don't think this is actually what your intent is. I guess there could be people who are out there trying to actually put people down with recommendations by making themselves feel smart, but that's a totally different scenario. That's not what I'm addressing. If people are doing that, that's kind of silly, and that's not really a recommendation at all. I'm going to assume we are all recommending these things when we say you have to see it or you have to read it out of a place of love, both for the art and for the person we're recommending the art to. We truly think that if they see it or read it, it'll help them a lot and they'll love it. But I just want to remind myself not to make it sound like I am judging them for not having seen it or surprised that they haven't caught up yet. Because if I do that, I can accidentally end up applying the label of homework on something that's supposed to be fun. And how are people supposed to enjoy that? So what do I say instead of you have to see it? The phrase I've been saying recently is you might like it. And I'm not trying to be wishy-washy by saying that, like, oh, you might like The Count of Monte Cristo, you might not, like, I don't care, I don't even know what I think or like. I'm pretty confident. I think that book is a masterpiece. I love it. And I think genuinely, if you read it all the way through the unabridged version, I think you'll love it too. But the reason I say you might like is not to be wishy-washy. It's to engage in a conversation and let the person talk with me about why they might or might not like it. So for example, if you said, oh, hey Tim, I haven't read The Count of Monte Cristo actually, I might just say, oh, it's actually my favorite book. I think you might really like it. And then you'd say, oh, why do you like it so much? Why do you think I might like it? And then I could give you the reasons, and I could say, well, it had such great characters and it had me hooked from the beginning. And I just remember feeling outraged at so many different points. And I think it's really awesome when a book can make you feel outraged and make you really care what might happen. So it deals really well with injustice and themes of revenge and forgiveness. And it's just got such a big, sweeping arc of a story. It's truly epic. And then you might say, oh, interesting, isn't it like super long? And I could say, oh yeah, 100% it is super long, so like definitely intimidating. I found it was a really fluid read, maybe not to do all in one sitting, but I couldn't put it down. So yeah, give it a shot, you might like it. I would highly recommend it. And then, maybe they read it, maybe they don't. You don't have to sacrifice your firm opinion on something to talk in a casual way about it. You don't have to be wishy-washy or pretend that you didn't really care about the book to make your recommendation. If you've seen the movie Inception, a big part of the plot is trying to plant an idea in the mind of a business executive, and they want him to break up his father's company for, reasons. And they can't just walk up to him in real life and tell him, hey, you should break up your father's company. They spend a very long time trying to work out an elaborate plan to sneak into his dreams and plant the idea there so he thinks it was his idea all along. And I think we can learn something from that as far as recommending stuff. People like feeling like they have a choice in what they're doing. I don't like to be told what to do. That feels like human nature, right? As soon as I'm told I am supposed to do something, I don't want to do it. So I'm not trying to trick my friends. I'm not trying to manipulate them into reading my favorite books. But I have found I have a better time recommending things that I think people might like by telling them truly, hey, I think you might like this, instead of saying, oh, you have to watch this or you have to see this, and setting their expectations too high and making them feel like they've missed the bus by not seeing it yet. Also, it's important for me to remember that when I say you might like, it's not just a thinly veiled version of you have to see it. It's actually true. They might like it, and they also might not like it. It's possible if you take my advice and you read The Count of Monte Cristo, maybe you don't like it. Maybe you don't like it at all, or maybe you don't like it in the same amount that I liked it. And that's okay. Everyone likes different things. But I think I'm going to give you the best shot at liking it by recommending it to you in a way that makes you feel like a free agent of choice who's able to pick the things you're interested in. So with that being said, little plug, I do think you might like The Count of Monte Cristo. Let me know if you read it. So one thing I'm going to be doing as I've been thinking about this is I'd like to start sharing recommendations with you guys, things I think that you might like, and I want to do that in two ways. So if you're interested in hearing things from me that I think you might like, there's two ways you can find those. The first will be right here on this channel. I will occasionally make videos where I, instead of talking about books or media in the broad sense, I will give specific recommendations and things that you might like, and then you can give that a shot. The second way will be by subscribing to my Substack blog. This is free. I just started it. In fact, the first post you can read down below is titled, I've been recommending things wrong my whole life. And it's basically just what this video said. So you don't really have to read it, but if you're curious, I do go into a little more detail there. And if you subscribe there, my plan is to send out maybe monthly. I'm not sure. I don't want to lock myself into anything, but occasionally as I see fit, I'd like to send out a couple of books or movies or music that I've been reading or watching or listening to lately that I think you might like. And while I plan for these emails to be super short, I do plan on spending a good amount of time preparing them and making sure that what I'm recommending are things I really want to recommend. If that sounds like it would be of value to you, you can sign up in the description below. I'd love to see you there, and you know what? I think you might like it. See you next time.